Titanic. Then and now.
Turning, we come in for a closer run with our color camera, looking at the bollards on the starboard side of the bow.
Good evening, I'm Ted Koppel, and this is Nightline. We'll relive the calamitous tragedy of 74 years ago as we take you to the ocean floor for a look inside the Titanic, a sight unseen by human eyes for 3/4 of a century. And we'll have an update on the exploration of the Titanic from the leader of the expedition.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
Our satellites, some of them, are fixed in orbit thousands of miles above the Earth. We have dispatched probes millions of miles into deep space. And yet, just 2 miles beneath the surface of the water, the wreckage of a great ocean liner, her bow deeply embedded in mud, lies where she sank 74 years ago. And only within the last few months have we been able to fix her location beyond any doubt, and only within the last few days have we begun to explore the site with a remote color television camera. As Nightline correspondent James Walker reports, once again, man's imagination and curiosity have combined to take us beyond another frontier.
On the second and third deck, we see this crystal chandelier.
You are looking at the first pictures ever taken of the interior of the Titanic, 74 years after she went down. It was one of the most spectacular disasters, the kind the experts predicted could never happen.
Abandon ship! Every man for himself!
But at 2:20 a.m. on the morning of April 15, 1912, the supposedly unsinkable Titanic, sailing on its maiden voyage across the Atlantic, sank. The ship had brushed a razor-sharp iceberg, cutting a 300-foot-long gash in its double-bottomed starboard hull. 1,528 passengers and crew members drowned. Only 705 survived. Among the lucky ones, Ruth Blanchard. She was 12 years old then. When the accident took place, her mother rushed to the main deck with Ruth, her younger brother, and sister. There, Ruth became separated and was placed in another lifeboat.
When we got to the water, we noticed there was a great big gash in the Titanic, and the water was rushing in there. The Titanic was a beautiful sight. The lights were all on, but the rows, there were 5 or 6 rows where people were standing looking over the rail, you know. And I suppose we just took it for granted that they would be saved. But in a little while, I don't know how long it was, in a little while, the ice water rushed into the boilers and exploded. Made a terrible noise.
Edwina Mackenzie, who died last year at the age of 100, was also a passenger on the Titanic.
As the boat was going down, our master-at-arms, his name was Bailey, got us all to sing, "Pull for the shore, sailors, pull for the shore." So we would not, to counteract the screaming of those who were touching the water, you know, because that scream of death is worse than any siren.
For 3/4 of a century, salvage crews, treasure hunters, and explorers have plotted, connived, and spent millions of dollars trying to locate the luxury liner, even raise it from its grave 2 miles below the surface. But it was not until last September that it was finally found. Dr. Robert Ballard led a scientific expedition which spotted the wreck some 400 miles southeast of Newfoundland. This week, a mini-sub manned by scientists from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute descended to the Titanic's deck where the Astors and the Guggenheims had strolled. Then the explorers sent out a remote-controlled, self-propelled robot about the size of a lawnmower named Jason Jr. Jason Jr. took directions through a cable that also sent back these spectacular pictures.
On the second and third deck, we see this crystal chandelier hanging from the ceiling, ornamented by a deep-sea coral. Here we are looking down over the bow with the big boom that's used to lower the secondary anchor into place. And coming up the side of the ship, you can see these iron sickles that hang down like giant icicles of rust. Up through the promenade, looking into the promenade windows, and rising up to the deck above. An overhead lifeboat davit with its block as we disturb these rust sickles and they fall down like a rain of iron.
Incidentally, to fortune hunters who have all these years believed the Titanic held millions of dollars worth of treasure, bad news. An historian says he's learned that the ship's vault carried not gold bullion or silver, but 12 cases of opium used to make medicine. Value in 1912, $20,000. I'm James Walker for Nightline.
When we come back, an interview we conducted just a short time ago with Robert Ballard, the leader of the three-man submarine team that's been conducting the Titanic exploration. Ballard walked us through some of the spectacular footage of the sunken vessel, footage that he sent back as we talked to him via ship-to-shore radio. Robert Ballard is the man on the scene in charge of the Titanic exploration, and just a short time ago he gave us a remarkably graphic account of how the mission is proceeding. All right, Dr. Ballard, through the magic of ship-to-shore radio communication here, I want you to sketch me a picture. What is it that you folks actually do? I mean, you're going to get up in just a few hours again, and you are going to do what? Get into a little submarine, a submersible?
Yeah, that's right. We're 800 miles out at sea in our research vessel Atlantis II, and we're sort of camped out 12,500 feet above the Titanic. We have beacons in the water surrounding the Titanic that we track, so we know where we are, and we know where the ship is. And then every morning we get up about 5 o'clock, have breakfast, and begin pre-diving the submarine. And we also pre-dive our little robot vehicle that's on the front of the submarine we call Jason Jr. We then maneuver the ship in the currents so that when we drop the submarine in the water and we let it go, and it begins to fall like a rock for 2.5 hours, we've sort of taken in our windage, if you will. And so we've timed it so the submarine should fall and end up very close to the Titanic after its 2.5-hour free fall. We have on the submarine, looking down, a very, very sensitive camera with an ASA at 200,000 ASA. You can almost see in the dark. And we can pick up the bottom about 100 feet off the deck and see it.
Now, Jason Jr. then, which is in effect a, well, I mean, it is a camera in a very tight or watertight package, right?
Yeah, it's sort of its own little miniature submarine, sort of like a little R2-D2 with propellers.
All right, now tell us, based on you, and you've been looking now, you've been doing this, what, for 5 days now?
Today was our 6th dive.
6th dive. What have you found?
Today we went down into the debris field, and actually today we found the ship's safes, all 4 of them. They were laying there on the bottom. We went over and the doors were shut, and we took Alvin's arm and turned them, but the doors wouldn't open, so we left them.
Now,
we worked all through the debris field, where the main after section of the ship was found, the stern section. And there were tremendous number of artifacts. There were just thousands and thousands of them.
Like?
And we did a lot of documentation of those artifacts.
Well, tell me what kind of things you found down there.
Well, it sort of runs the gauntlet. We found the wine cellar area where there were just hundreds and hundreds of wine bottles. And by the way, the champagne bottles still had their corks in them. There were hundreds of champagne bottles. We went into the kitchen area and all the pots and pans. There were just tremendous copper pans and ladles. And then we were in a dining room area where there was beautiful silver plates and everything you can imagine. Then in the engine area, reciprocating engines, we found 3 of the big boilers laying on the bottom, chamber pots, coffee mugs, just the whole spectrum of artifacts.
You know, I mean, first of all, I have to ask you about your capacity to do it, but then I'm also asking you about your desire to do it. There must be a tremendous urge to souvenir hunt, to bring things back. I mean, even if they don't have enormous monetary value, although I'm sure you could sell them for a lot of money, just the urge to bring this stuff back after 74 years.
Well, you can resist it, and I guess it's sort of the transition you go when we used to go out and hunt with guns and shoot animals and hang their heads on walls, and now we go out with cameras. And I think hopefully we're reaching that stage in underwater artifacts. They're fine where they are. Whatever damage is going to be done to them has been long done to them, particularly the wood.
Dr. Ballard, you know the video that was sent off your ship today. Just describe the grand staircase and the chandelier. What is it we're looking at here?
We have just landed the submarine up on the top deck, actually right below where the elevator shaft was, or right above the elevator shaft on the deck. And then Jason Jr. flew out and went down the hole. Now, the staircase itself has been literally eaten up by wood-boring organisms. So in place of a staircase is this long, deep hole and shaft. And so we, like a little helicopter, went down that shaft and could scan around as we went, looking at each deck. So it was like a layer cake. And so we went into those rooms and went up to one of the chandeliers, and it was beautifully ornamented by a Gorgonian, or actually I think it was a crinoid, sort of like a deep-sea starfish. It was hooked onto the chandelier. It was very pretty.
In terms of what you have seen through Jason, does this provide an affirmation of what you knew would be there, or is there in any respect a surprise?
Well, if anything, there's a disappointment. The sea has claimed the Titanic. It's not the beautiful ship that sank. The wood's gone. A lot of the ship was beautiful woodwork, and the ship's hull is rusting. So in a respect, it's been transformed. It now is ornamented with rivers of rust that form rust sickles running down the side. It's sort of like a Dr. Zhivago's Dako in the dead of winter, but instead of icicles that are white, you have iron sickles that are all bright orange and red.
All right. Well, Dr. Ballard, you've got your remote control, and we've got you, and you've done a wonderful job of helping us to go down there to the Titanic and explore it, courtesy of your eyes and ears and all the magic that you brought to bear to it. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know you got to go to bed because you got to get up real early again.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure, and I hope you enjoyed the images we sent.
Thank you very much indeed. We did enjoy them. When we come back, we'll talk with Dr. Dana Yerger, an expert on undersea robotics at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, which is overseeing the Titanic exploration, and with Charles Haas, an historian and expert on the Titanic. Joining us live now from dockside at Woods Hole, Cape Cod, Massachusetts, is Dana Yerger, assistant scientist at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution and an expert on undersea robotics. Dr. Yerger is project manager of the submarine robot combo known as Argo Jason that is currently exploring the Titanic. And joining us in our New York studios is Charles Haas, president of the Titanic Historical Society and co-author of the forthcoming book, Titanic, Triumph and Tragedy. In a sense, gentlemen, you represent the past and the future here as it relates to the Titanic. I'd like to begin with the past. Charles Haas, what have you seen? What have you heard? What has been found that in any way adds to the sum of knowledge that you already had?
I think first of all, we see that the Titanic is in remarkable condition considering all that she went through during the sinking. It really is a testament to the shipyard that built her that she survived as well as she did. I think something that Dr. Ballard said is also very important to note here, and that is that virtually everything that has been found thus far is a piece of the ship. There are no personal belongings of passengers and crew, and I think that's a significant factor in deciding whether this ship should be explored and, in fact, salvaged.
Why?
Well, I think a lot of people are laboring under the misconception that the Titanic was very much a treasure ship, and the facts simply do not bear that out. For example, we find that the purser's safes that Dr. Ballard has located late in the evening during the evacuation, there are witnesses that point out that those safes were being emptied of their jewels. The purser's staff actually took the jewels out of the safes, tossed them into canvas mailbags, and apparently the idea was to bring those up to the boat deck and keep the insurance settlement down. But as the ship upended, the purser staff and all of those jewels were upended into the ocean, and who knows where they were.
So, I mean, it's possible that somewhere under all of that mud, those canvas bags, well, the bags have probably deteriorated by now, but that the jewels are somewhere under 40 feet of mud.
That's right. So it might be very difficult to find those. And then if we take a look at Titanic's cargo situation, there too we see a very pedestrian, non-treasure-oriented cargo.
Now, James Walker mentioned in his close that indeed what was in that cargo hold, I forget now whether it was 20 boxes or 20 pounds of opium, but I mean, explain the cases of opium. How was opium used in those days? He made mention of the fact that it was used in medicine, but it was used in patent medicine, wasn't it?
Yes, that's correct. This was the days when almost anything went. This was just at the very beginning of the Food and Drug Administration start, and as a result, almost anything could be put into medicine, and if it had an effect on the patient, good or bad, that's all that mattered.
Now, Dr. Yerger, to get to the other end of this, in a sense, the kind of exploration that you folks are involved in, or in terms of that sort of exploration, looking for the Titanic, examining the Titanic, is almost incidental to what you folks are really after, isn't it? What are you really after?
That's right. The real purpose of this technology is to explore the seafloor and answer the really vast range of scientific questions. It seems the more we look, the more questions we come up with. And that's what Argo Jason is really about.
Well, give us a few of the questions, and if you can, even a couple of the answers, if you come up with them yet.
Okay. Well, in fact, the Earth's crust is formed deep in the ocean, and that makes it extremely interesting to geologists and geophysicists. And marine biologists have recently had a large number of surprises there. The deep ocean was supposedly totally dead, but now they find that in very special spots, it's actually teeming with life. And as an engineer, I'm interested in building the tools that can really allow that type of exploration to be done efficiently and effectively.
Tell me what the next generation of exploration is going to be, because ultimately you're actually going to be able to stay where you are right now, almost literally at dockside, and be running some of these robotic, what's the word I'm looking for, fact-finding expeditions from where you are, correct?
That's right, and we're doing this in stages, and what you're seeing out there now is the first stage. The people are in the submarine, and Jason Jr. is flying down the grand staircase. The next stage is to have the people up aboard the ship operating with the system remotely on the seafloor, and as you say, the final step is for the scientists not even to have to leave port.
And to send out these little submarines that are going to be able to scan the bottom of the ocean for you.
Well, that's still quite a ways off, but I think that might be possible sometime in the future.
All right, Mr. Haas, let's see if we can marry up the past and the future now. Tell me, if you were in that submarine right now, what would you be looking for? And what, I mean, you can pass the word here. They've still got 5 days to go. What do you want them to look for?
I'd like to see the ship's name, for one thing. I think really that represents the embodiment of Titanic, those 18-inch high golden letters engraved in her bow. I'd also like to see the size of the cut in the ship's hull. I think it would be very interesting to confirm the 1912 statement that cut measured only 12 square feet in size. Nothing more than a single slice, a very tiny slice. So I'd like to see some pictures of the damage that the iceberg did and try to tie that into the actual events of the sinking itself. I
was just reading an account, in fact, I think it was an account that Dr. Ballard wrote in the National Geographic. Is it true that a lookout actually spotted that iceberg about a quarter mile away, and because he gave the warning, the man who was on duty at that hour ordered full astern or whatever the order was, right, thereby turning the ship so that rather than hitting the iceberg head on, a collision that she might have survived, she hit that iceberg, that glancing blow, and that's what sunk her. Is that true?
That's absolutely correct. As a matter of fact, they did some tests with Titanic's sister ship, a virtually identical vessel, and they found that it was 37 seconds between the time the lookout spotted the berg and when they actually hit. If he had had another 10 seconds, if he had seen it 10 seconds sooner, the Titanic would have cleared altogether. If he had spotted it 10 seconds later, there would have been a head-on collision. The ship would have crushed back to the forward mast. 2 watertight compartments would have been open, and she would have stayed afloat. So
all right, gentlemen, let's take a break. We're going to come back in just a moment, and we will continue our discussion then. Continuing our discussion now with Dana Yerger and Charles Haas. Dr. Yerger, is it possible physically for one of these little submarines to pick things up? I mean, if you wanted to do that, if you wanted to move things around, if you wanted to lift things up, open a safe door, if you had the capacity, can you do that?
Certainly. Both the manned submersible Alvin that's down there, well, Alvin has that capability now, and the remotely operated vehicles, as we call the small robots, can have quite sophisticated capabilities in that regard, although Jason Jr. does not have that capability now.
So, in other words, Jason Jr., that's the little R2-D2 that we were talking about earlier, that is kind of limited by its 250-foot cable, right?
That's right.
In terms of where it can go. There it is. I mean, is the day going to come when you're going to be able to snap that cable and just kind of program it?
Well, we're working on that development in several regards, but technologically that's quite a long way away. A more attractive intermediate option is the use of better cables using technologies like fiber optics to bring back extremely high-quality information to the human operator. So he really feels like he's right there, and that's the next step. Cutting the cable is quite a bit further away, we feel.
All right, Mr. Haas, we've got about half a minute left. A last shot at the past. What else are you interested in seeing?
Ted, I think the scientific endeavors that are going on out in the Atlantic, those are really the way to explore the Titanic. And I would like to see in the future that the Titanic be preserved in her current state as at least the symbolic resting place of those 1,500 people who were lost 74 years ago.
So what's there, leave it there.
Exactly.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Dana Yerger and Charles Haas, good of you to be with us.
My pleasure.
It's a pleasure.
I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.